Thank you all for introducing yourselves. Joyce, Mercy, really appreciate it. I can see people from Ethiopia, Ghana, and of course, Kenya. Thank you for joining us. I can see someone from Netherlands is joining us as well. Welcome. We'll wait on a few more people before we start this webinar. Thanks again for coming in time. We really appreciate your time. Thank you. Welcome, Stella, from the CIEC group. So we'll give everyone around 3 minutes before we start the webinar. Thank you. I see a few more people joining. Welcome. Please introduce yourselves on the chats, please. Welcome, Yusuf from Fred Hollows Foundation. Okay, I think we have enough people, so we're ready to start. Thank you so much again for joining us. We really do appreciate you taking time out of your day to join us for this webinar today. So as you can see, the webinar today is about, is your nonprofit prepared for a cyber attack? And of course, this is a topic that's very important, and where our aim is to kind of create awareness for all of you and also educate you on what you can do about any cyber attacks that come into your nonprofit. I'll begin by explaining the agenda for today. Could please go to the next slide. Yes, so I'm going to start with introductions of our panelists, which is Zahir and Paul, who are experts here at BDO representing BDO East Africa. I'll follow by explaining the highlights of cybersecurity, which will be taken over by Zahir, which will, which will follow up by importance of cybersecurity for NGOs, and will also explain with real life case studies based on Kenya and elsewhere. We'll also talk about understanding cyber threats, assessing NGO cybersecurity readiness, building a cybersecurity strategy for NGOs, which is more of a step-by-step process on what you guys can do for NGOs to prevent any cyber attacks. We'll also talk about incident response and recovery, collaboration and best practices, which is important in any organization. And we'll end it with a Q&A session. To make this more engaging, we'd like you to maybe type in your questions in the chat, and then we'll kind of group them, and any of the common questions we'll discuss them, and any other questions we'll collaborate all of them and then get back to you through email. Thank you once again. I'll begin by introducing Zahir. Zahir is a partner at BDO East Africa for risk advisory, internal audit, and forensics. And he has had over 30 years of experience, so he's definitely an expert. He's had 7 years in the UK and 24 years of professional experience here at KPMG in East Africa before joining BDO. And he's a regional partner for the Forensic Service Department, and he's managed large investigations and provided a lot of management services and anti-money laundering expertise as well. And we'll move on to Paul. So Paul is also a manager here in the Technology Advisory and Business Intelligence Services at BDO East Africa, where his expertise is in IT consulting, and he studied at the University of Nairobi, where he pursued a Bachelor's of Science in Business. He has 11 years of experience in IT consulting and has provided a lot of IT consulting services here at BDO. So I'd like to introduce you to the two panelists today, and Zahir, you can take it over and kick off this webinar. Thank you so much. You're on mute, Zahir. Could you please unmute yourself, Zahir? Thank you.
Right there. Can you hear me now? Good afternoon to everyone, and a very warm welcome to all of you on today's very exciting topic, which I know is top of mind of nearly everybody with a C-suite position, and anybody else that's working in IT. This is really top of mind. Before I start and jump in, just very briefly, a little bit about BDO. As you know, BDO is a global advisory firm and an audit practice. We're actually the 5th largest globally. You can see in the map there, all of the areas shaded in dark gray is where we have a presence. So we have a fairly large footprint globally, as well as in Africa. Last year, we had a turnover of 12.8 billion shillings. We have a presence in 164 countries, in over 1,800 offices, and we employ over 100,000 professionals. We provide a range of services. The basic ones, which is audit and tax, statutory audit, audit of donor-funded projects, special purpose audits, and so on and so forth. We also provide a lot of IFRS training. And then we have a full complement of tax services, tax compliance, advisory, transfer pricing, and also tax litigation. And then we have business services and outsourcing, where we handle accounting and bookkeeping for our clients. We can compile your annual reports for you. We can prepare management reports, provide payroll services, company secretarial services, and so on and so forth. And then the unit where I sit, which is advisory services, where we provide internal audit and risk management, management consultancy, corporate recovery and business turnaround, corporate finance and transaction services, forensic investigations, and also technology advisory. One of the services is managing cyber security threats, and then business intelligence. So a little bit about our program for today, and let's talk about what this is all about. So, as we all know, technology has become an integral part of our daily lives, and the importance of cybersecurity cannot be overstated. With the exponential development of digital platforms and the increasing sophistication of cyber threats, individuals and organizations are now forced to prioritize their cyber security measures. We will explore the significance of cybersecurity in the digital age and highlight the key reasons why it should be a top priority for everyone. So, why focus on not-for-profit organizations? We know that a primary function of the not-for-profit organizations is the delivery of humanitarian assistance and protection to people who may be made vulnerable by conflict, by disaster, and other complex emergencies. And we know that cyber attacks can have a crippling impact on their ability to function. Such attacks, when they do happen, they put huge pressure on the NGOs' limited resources. They not only prevent them from fulfilling their missions in the short term, but they also inflict long-term reputational damage, and they undermine the confidence in the NGO and in its ability to fulfill its role in current and future crises and emergencies. Not-for-profits are appealing targets for cyber criminals. The cyber criminal world has almost zeroed in on them for a number of reasons. Firstly, they don't believe that these NGOs, not-for-profit organizations, they don't believe that they have the resources to hire cybersecurity teams to protect themselves. They are thought to have aging technology and infrastructure, which is easy to penetrate. And they also believe that staff working in these not-for-profit organizations are most susceptible to phishing scams, and also the personal data as well as financial data in an NGO is valuable in the black market. So let's embark on a journey to explore cybersecurity. We will delve into some case studies, both local as well as international, to show you how criminals operate and the kind of damage they can cause. We will look at the importance of entrenching cybersecurity into your risk management practices, and we'll cover in some detail the 8 steps of how to conduct an effective and holistic cyber risk assessment, cybersecurity risk assessment. We will provide practical tips on how to design your incident response plan. And finally, we'll end by taking some questions at the end. But first, we need to understand what we mean by cyber attack. What is a cyber attack? Well, a cyber attack is basically an attempt by hackers to damage or destroy a computer, network, or system. There are lots of different kinds of cyber attacks. I'm going to talk about the top 5 now and maybe a few more in the coming slides. So let's start with the first one, malware. Malware is basically short for malicious software. And this is a file or a code typically delivered over a network that infects, it explores, it steals, or conducts virtually any behavior an attacker wants. Then there is phishing. Phishing is a type of online fraud that involves tricking people into providing sensitive information, such as passwords or credit card numbers, by masquerading as a trustworthy source. So phishing can be done through email, through social media, or malicious websites. Spear phishing, and this is not fishing in the ocean. My granddad used to be a fisherman, but this kind of phishing is a highly targeted form of phishing designed to deceive individuals or organizations into revealing sensitive information. And unlike regular phishing, which is a broad and untargeted approach, Spear phishing is a highly personalized attack aimed at specific individuals, businesses, or roles within an organization. And then there's ransomware. And this is a type of a malicious software, malware, that threatens to publish or block access to data or to a computer system, usually by encrypting it, until the victim pays a ransom fee to the attacker. In many cases, the ransom demand comes with a deadline. And then you've got the DDoS attack, which is a distributed denial of service attack. This is a malicious attempt to disrupt the normal traffic of a targeted server, service, or network by overwhelming the target or its surrounding infrastructure with a flood of internet traffic. So basically, you're just blocking their internet. Then there's a couple of others as well, which are worth knowing about. So there's the SQL injection. It's also known as the SQLI. It's a common attack vector that uses malicious SQL code for backend database manipulation to access information that was not intended to be displayed. This information may include any number of items, including sensitive company data, user lists, or private customer details. The next one is DNS hijacking, which is also known as domain theft. This is a kind of attack that involves maliciously gaining control of a domain name. The threat actor achieves this by either stealing the owner's login credentials or by exploiting a vulnerability in the domain registrar's system. And then you've got advanced persistent threat, APT. This is a broad term used to describe an attack campaign in which an intruder or a team of intruders establish an illicit long-term presence on a network in order to mine highly sensitive data. The targets of these assaults, which are very carefully and cleverly chosen and researched, they'll typically include large enterprises or government networks. And the consequences of such intrusions can be very, very serious and very vast. And then you've got a man in the middle, or MITM attack, is a general term for when a perpetrator positions himself in a conversation between a user and an application, either to eavesdrop or to impersonate one of the parties. And they try and make it appear as if a normal exchange of information is underway. The goal of the attack is to steal personal information such as login credentials, account details, and credit card numbers. Targets are typically the users of financial applications, SaaS businesses, e-commerce sites, and other websites where login is required. So why is our website focused on non-profit? Well, first of all, I mean, we know NPOs have strict obligations for donor funds. You know, their funds in many cases are restricted and they are targeted. So the strategic objective almost always outweighs the objective of getting your information security risks contained. So these are targeted funds or restricted funds. And then the second one is weak systems and policies. Internal policies and procedures do not take into account IT security to a large extent. Most not-for-profit organizations will lack IT policies and procedures to guide the organization's IT environment and use of systems. And most of them go for commercial off-the-shelf systems, and they use them with default configurations. And then the next one is insufficient IT employees. Most not-for-profits, if not all, will only have one staff in the IT department, and it is very difficult for them to juggle IT support with IT security. And then they also have limited budgets. Donor-funded organizations have a cost cap on CapEx and OpEx, operational expenditure, and the budgets cannot sustain a robust IT security framework. Some not-for-profit budgets are so limited that hiring specialists or hiring even specialist software is considered very costly. And then the next one is insufficient regulatory oversight. Unlike banks and other financial institutions who are required to conduct regular IT security assessments by law, not-for-profits and NGOs have no such oversight. And then finally, you've got big data. Not-for-profits often store quite sensitive information, including donor details, financial records, as well as personal details of their beneficiaries. Here are some cyber statistics which are quite useful. So Kenya was hit in 1 year by a record 860 million cyber attacks. I mean, that's a staggering number. Yeah, and cybersecurity statistics indicate there are 2,200 cyber attacks per day, with a cyber attack happening every 39 seconds on average. In the US, a data breach costs an average of nearly $10 million, and cybercrime is predicted to cost $8 trillion, okay, by the end of this year. And then around 30,000 websites are hacked every day globally, out of which 43% are targeted at small businesses. And 300,000 fresh malware instances are generated daily. I mean, think about that number. That's a staggering number, 300,000, malware. So these are people who are basically just busy designing software, that is designed to get into your systems and disrupt your systems. And 92% of them are distributed through email, with an average of 49 days to be detected. So quite frightening statistics. And if you look at the significance, I mean, why is all this important? First of all, statistics show that only 1 in 10 NGOs train their staff regularly on cybersecurity. And only 1 in 4 monitor their networks. And only 1 in 5 have a cyber security plan of any sort. So I'm going to introduce my colleague, Paul Macharia. Paul Macharia is a IT expert, and he spends a lot of his time helping our clients navigate through cybersecurity risks. And when they are hit by cybersecurity, he helps them to minimize the damage. So, Paul, I'm going to basically ask you to come in now. You can share your screen.
All right, thank you, Zahir. Please let me know when my screen is visible.
It's visible now.
Great. Thank you, Zahir, for the lovely introduction. Now that we've taken a look at how cyber attacks usually happen, we need to now then take another step into understanding the cyber threats, and this is usually grouped into 2 main scenarios. In this section, we will look at the 2 major types of scenarios cyber attacks would follow. And so there are 2 scenarios. The first scenario is when you have a low skill, low motivation attacker. In this scenario, a not-for-profit client is usually hit by a professional grade attacker who is well resourced, however, does not have the expertise or the very high level of access that an attacker in this case will usually have. A good example is when someone gains access to any account or any domain and gains global admin rights. which means that they could easily just get into the system and conduct a lot more damage, and they are not really targeting anything. The second scenario is where you have a highly skilled attacker with a specific plan and with a lot of background information. I give you an example. A non-profit's Office 365 tenant was breached by an attacker who was operating on global admin credentials. Once they got into the system, they granted themselves access to all the mailboxes, and especially those for the organizational leaders. The next thing the attackers did was to send a request to initiate a wire transfer to both the finance director and the controller within that organization. They used then the finance director's account to immediately reply to the same message, and also deleting that message from that particular finance administrator's account, so they could not be able to tell that they sent out these emails. Once they granted themselves access to the finance director's email, they went above and beyond, because usually there's always 2 levels of approval. These are on the processes side, and they granted themselves access to the executive director's email. Upon granting themselves this, multiple backups were then made and deleted. And the last thing they did was to lock out everyone in the organization so they could continue using all the access that they had in the system. On top of this, it was very hard to detect this because they were using a Tor browser. For those who know Tor, this is an anonymized service which makes their connections to the client's tenant appear to come from anywhere and all over the world. So when we look at these two scenarios, it gives us a hint at how cyber attacks should actually happen. And in my next slide, I will just discuss top 10 cyber attacks in the history of the world. The first, we can always learn from the past. So let's take a look at some of history's biggest attacks. The first one is the Melissa virus. This came in 1999 by a programmer called David Lee Smith. He sent users a file to open by Microsoft Word, which had a virus. So if you can remember what Zahir said, malware attacks. Once the opened virus was activated, it caused a severe damage in a lot of companies within Microsoft. It is estimated that this attack cost upwards of $80 million to repair the systems. And this was in 1999. On the second one is the NASA cyber attack. Again, in 1999, a 15-year-old named James Jonathan hacked and knocked down NASA's computers for a period of a total of 21 days. This cost around 1.7 million in software downloads during the attack, and it cost the space giant a whopping $41,000 in repairs. The third one was in 2007, some 8 years after, and this is the 2007 Estonia cyber attack. Estonia witnessed what it is thought to be their first ever cyber attack on the entire country. And this saw 58 Estonian websites go offline, including the government, the bank, and the media websites. Just recently, a similar case happened here in Kenya, and I will get to that. Number 4 was for the gamers in this webinar, the Sony PlayStation Network, where an attack in 2011 compromised a total of 77 million users. At the time, PlayStation Network had around 150 million users, so this represents 50% of all the users. We move on to hotels, and this is more recent, it's 2018. The attack on Marriott Hotels, where Marriott Hotels Group went and an attack had been implemented within their system and had been there and had remained undetected for very many years, but only came to light in 2018. By the time they became aware of this attack, it is estimated that 333 million guests had their data compromised. And consequently, because of the GDPR, it was noted that UK Data Privacy Watchdog fined Marriott Hotels a total of 18.4 million pounds. On to some applications that we usually use as often. This was the Adobe cyber attack that was first thought to have breached up to 2.9 million users, but it was then discovered that it had taken up data for up to 38 million users. This is across the globe. The remaining 35.1 million users suffered a loss of their passwords and their user IDs. On to some nations. Ukraine's power grid attack. This happened in 2015 and was the first ever cyber attack on a power grid. This resulted into half of the homes in the Ivano-Frankivsk region of Ukraine remaining without power for a few hours. Another one is the 2017 WannaCry ransomware attack. This was the first that was very well broadcasted by almost every media station, which saw around 200,000 computers in over 150 countries fall victim to a ransomware attack. To sum this up, the ransomware had a huge impact on several industries, with global costs coming to around £6 billion to fix. On to some of our email accounts. Those who still have Yahoo accounts, remember in 2014, Yahoo was subjected to one of the biggest cyber attacks when almost 500 million accounts were compromised. During this attack, information and passwords were stolen, whereas a lot of bank information was also grabbed. To sum this up, I'll bring you closer to this particular decade, and this is known to be the biggest password leak yet. And this is the RockU 2021 attack. In June 2021, we saw the compilation of around 8.4 billion passwords leaked. And this was more than 32 million accounts that were breached since 2009. So this went undetected for a period of 11 years. On to some case studies in 2023. There was a big financial network breach on the global financial networks. This occurred early in the year, which resulted into the disruption of worldwide financial operations for an extended period of time, and the information is still being gathered on this. Another one was an e-voting system hack, where there was increased, because of the increased nature of adoption of electronic voting systems by numerous nations, it has been seen that a lot of e-vote attacks have been happening in the last, let's say, 10 years, but this was very, very highlighted by the global institutions in and around e-voting infrastructure and protection of e-voting infrastructure. On the critical infrastructure attacks, so there were so many simultaneous attacks that were carried out in the year, especially in multiple European countries, and you can attribute this to the ongoing war in the Far East and most recently in the Middle East. There was a mass breach of social media giants. For those who probably are on social media, there were almost 500 users' accounts that were trafficked and sold to the dark web this year alone. In the age of AI, we have seen now it doesn't require a physical attacker like the NASA attacker who was just 15 years old. We are looking at AI-powered phishing campaigns where you just write code and the AI just discovers itself. And if you know how AI works, it means it's faster than 1 million humans put together. So this is something that has been very big in 2023. And finally, a big review that needs to be undertaken is on the smart device takeover. Because most of people and people across the world have intertwined their devices, where you have your laptop intertwined to your mobile phone, to your smart fridge, to your smart washing machine. So instead of attacking your phone and your computer, which ideally have a lot of security on them, you attack a device that's inside your ecosystem and then plunge some malware, which then attacks all other systems. So these are the common trends that we have seen in 2023. Let's bring it closer home now. For those who know, there were some key attacks here in Kenya, and I will just highlight 3 in the interest of time. As Zahir had mentioned, there are almost 860 million incidents that were recorded this year by the country's communication regulator. This is the Communications Authority of Kenya. A good example is the government attacks on government website attacks that was perpetrated by a group called Anonymous Sudan. This happened just a few months ago on 27th July, where we saw a high-profile attack attributed to the pro-Russian group Anonymous Sudan that disrupted over 5,000 online government services, affecting crucial functions such as visas, passports, driver's license applications, and renewals. The assault also crippled the online train booking systems for the SGR, as well as some of the digital banking and mobile services. So the other companies that were really affected are Kenya Power and Lighting Company, again, because of the mobile transactions, the Kenyan Railways Corporation, the National Transport Safety Authority. And in this case, you could remember that the ICT Cabinet Secretary said, and I will quote, "Unsuccessful attempts to overload the system with extraordinary requests intentioning to clog the system were thwarted." So this was more or less a DDoS attack, and Zahir had mentioned this earlier. The second one is the Naivas supermarket chain. This was perpetrated by a group called Threat Actor, and this was in May of 2023, and this particular supermarket chain suffered a ransomware attack by online criminals. Naivas did take the immediate steps to also prevent external access, and they also recruited a team called CrowdStrike to ensure that the system remained absolutely secure. However, concerning this attack, it came to light that there was a lot of information that was leaked out, and luckily the supermarket did claim that they do not have any credit card or debit card information stored in the systems. The last one is the University of Nairobi, and this went under the radar quite during the July 19th, in and around the same time that the government services were hacked. The university, which is the largest university in Kenya, issued a notification of a possible data breach affecting the student management information system. The first thing the university did was to take the system online, and then they also escalated the matter to the National Computer Cybercrimes Coordination Committee, the NC4. The incident flew under the radar, and no one else reported other downtimes, but this has now been taken into account by the Kenya Bureau of Statistics. In summary, Kenya now ranks third in Africa for the most targeted as the most targeted country for cyber criminals, only trailing Nigeria and South Africa. However, it's not all doom and gloom. I will just give you a representation of the National Cyber Incident Response Team statistics from Q3 of 2023. As you may know, the Kenya Information Systems and Communications Act of 1998 mandates the Communications Authority of Kenya to develop a national cyber security management framework through the establishment of National Computer Communications Center. So from the statistics, we note that there was a decrease of 11.36% on the total cyber threats that were detected. This was from Q2, which is June 2023. As at the end of June 2023, the numbers were representing 139,775 threats within that period. The decrease has been attributed to ongoing cyber awareness and capacity building efforts, as well as the uptake in adoption of digital signatures within the country. Also, there was a reduction of 48% in the total threat advisories which were issued, which came down from 10 million advisories in Q2 to 5,581,354 incidents. And this can be attributed to the significance in the number of brute force attacks that happened during this period. And again, that applies to the three scenarios that I've also just taken into account. So this shows a positive outlook in the reduction of cyber attacks. And this source can be verified from the cybersecurity, the 31st cybersecurity report, which is July to September 2023. So then, now that we have discussed everything to do with, and we have gone through a few examples, how does assessing your readiness help your NGO or your not-for-profit in being ready for these attacks? So the first thing is conducting a cybersecurity risk assessment. And you may ask, what is a cyber risk assessment? Cyber risk assessment is a process that evaluates the vulnerabilities and threats within an organization in order to gain a proper picture of the identified risks and the potential damage that it may cause. Carrying out a cyber risk assessment provides a holistic view of an organization's network and security from an attacker's perspective. It is an invaluable tool and serves in the basis of risk management and tackling complex risk assessments. Prior to conducting a cybersecurity assessment, standards like the ISO 27001, which is the Information System Security Management Framework, as well as the NIST, which is the National Institute of Cybersecurity. These are two organizations who are been there for a lot of years, and they come up with various guidelines on how to mitigate information security risks and also giving a structured manner in which to control and mitigate these risks. What is the importance of a cybersecurity assessment? So there are some certain questions you need to ask yourself while conducting a cybersecurity risk assessment. A question like, what are our organization's most important information technology assets? What type of data breach would you have in terms of the significant impact on your organization, whether it's a malware attack, a cyber attack, or even a human error? What is the impact of those vulnerabilities if they're exploited? What is the likelihood of exploitation? And what is the level of risk in my organization that my organization is comfortable in taking up? So if you can answer any of these questions, you can decide what is important to protect. And that means you can be able to develop security controls and data security strategies for remediation. There are several risk management frameworks available, and the choice depends on your industry, your risk appetite, and any other applicable regulations. Right then, so let's go straight into building a cybersecurity strategy for NGOs. I'll start by a quote by Ludmila Morozov-Boss, where it states that the stellar evolution of cybersecurity, the evolutionary process of stars depends upon their initial mass. The evolutionary process of cybersecurity depends on how the hyperconvergence of cyber dependencies, people, processes, and technology can combine. Step one is usually determining the informational value. So there are various questions you should ask yourself. Are there any financial or legal penalties associated with exposing or losing this information that I am currently holding? How valuable is this information to any competitor? And this is with regards to the information going into the black market. Could we recreate this information from scratch if we were to lose it today? And how long will it take, and what would be the associated costs? Would losing this data impact the day-to-day business operations, and could our staff work without it? What would be the reputational damage if this data is leaked? Most organizations don't have an unlimited budget for information risk management, and NGOs are no different. So limiting the scope to the most critical business assets is the best way to go. To save time and money later, spend time understanding and defining the standard for determining the importance of an asset. Most organizations include the asset value, legal standing, and also the business importance. Once the standard is formally incorporated into the organization's information security policy, you can use this now to classify each asset as either critical, which is crucial, major, or minor. You protect the critical and major assets, and you also just keep a watchful eye over your minor risks. The second step is to identify and prioritize assets. The first step after you have enumerated the information is to identify the assets that evaluate and determine the scope of this assessment. This will also help you to assess the assets and knowing which assets to assess. Some Organizations would even look at the buildings, the employees, the electronic data, trade secrets, office equipment. And also remember, not all assets have the same value. We need to work with business users and management to create a list of valuable assets. For these assets, we look at hardware and software, data as an asset, your end users who are your employees as an asset, the purpose and criticality of your assets. These are metrics that you need to take into account. Do you have IT security policies and IT security infrastructure? Have you documented your network topology? Do you have a framework that shows the information flow within the organization? Do you have the technical security and the physical security controls? And if you're in a co-working space, are you in an environmentally secure environment? That's step 2. Step 3 is to identify cyber threats. After identifying your organization's threats, you will need to assess the impact to ensure your security teams will respond to cyber threats promptly and ensure that you have a well-designed and regulated tested incident response plan. A cyber threat is any vulnerability that could be exploited to a breach, and this can cause the organization to crumble. While hackers, malwares, and other IT security risks slip to mind, there are also many other threats, such as natural disasters. So you should take into account floods, hurricanes, earthquakes, lightning, fire that can destroy you as well as a cyber attacker could. You can not only lose your data, but you can also use your servers too. When deciding on whether to take an on-premise environment or a cloud-based environment, you should consider natural disasters. There are also adversarial threats, and these are third parties, vendors, insiders, trusted insiders, privileged insiders, established hacker collectives like the threat actors that we have discussed, the ad hoc groups, the corporate espionage, suppliers, even other nations and states. From a human error perspective, you should also ask yourself, are your systems holding sensitive information, and are the systems properly configured to counter against human errors? Does the organization have the proper educational policies covering common tactics that cyber criminals use, such as social engineering, phishing scams, etc.? Last but not least, you should also consider in step 3, a potential system failure. This is taking into account, not taking into account natural disasters or any adversarial effects, but would you know that if your most critical systems are running on the most highest quality of equipment, and also on top of that, is that equipment well maintained, and do you have a good support team? Step 4 is to perform a vulnerability assessment and penetration testing exercise. Now it's time to move on from what could happen to moving on to what might happen. A vulnerability is a weakness that basically can be posing a threat to your organization. And you can reduce the organizational software-based vulnerabilities by just running a proper vulnerability assessment and penetration testing exercise, which would then guide you on some of the weaknesses that may be in your environment, such as patch management, outdated systems. Instead, what you should, from a vulnerability assessment, it should be able to guide you to ensuring a proper patch management environment and ensuring that you have forced system updates so that no user in the organization is running on an updated type of platform. But then again, don't forget the physical vulnerabilities. The chance of someone gaining access to your organization's computer system is only reduced by having a keycard access. The second stage is now then reducing and identifying the vulnerabilities within your ecosystem by just implementing a attack surface monitoring solution. An attack surface management solution is an effective strategy for minimizing the number of attack vectors that your digital footprint could reduce, and then this would consequently reduce the frequency of your data breaches. After all that is done, and you have analyzed your controls, you've analyzed your vulnerabilities, the next thing is to check on, do I have the right preventive and detective controls? Controls can be implemented through technical means, and this is usually on hardware or software, having encryption, intrusion detection mechanisms, implementing multi-factor and two-factor authentication, automatic updates, continuous data leak detection, or even through non-technical means by just having the right security policies and the physical mechanism like locked doors and magnetic keycard access to the organizations. So when you're trying to assess your control framework, there are two types. A preventive control is any attempt to stop an attack from ever occurring. And then a detective control is to discover an attack while it's either underway or it's through continuous data exposure detection. Step 6 is then after you have done your VAPT, you have also identified your assets. The next thing is to calculate the likelihood and impact on these various scenarios per year basis. There's a simple formula which likelihood is a multiplier of threats and vulnerabilities multiplied by the impact. This is how much impact the business would suffer. And this then gives you the score for a security risk. Now, you know the information value, the threats, everything else. Imagine that if you have a database that stores all your information, and this is valued at, let's say, 100 million. Based on your estimates, how you use this formula is you estimate that in the event of a breach, at least half of your data will be exposed before it will be contained. This is using detective controls. So that brings it to a figure of around 50 million loss. But you expect that this is unlikely to occur, maybe say 1 every 50 years. And this would then mean your cost in annual terms would result into $1 million yearly. So use that math and you can calculate for your own organizations. 7 is once you have done the formulas and you now need to classify your risks, is that there is no way that the cost of securing your asset is worth more than the asset itself. So that said, remember that there could be reputational impact and not just financial impact. It's also very essential to factor that into. Using a risk level and a basis to determine the senior management and other responsible individuals, there are 3 main categories, and these are the general guidelines. Some people go for 5, some people go for 3, and this is high, medium, and low. So the high risks and high costs that you have identified, their corrective measures need to be developed as soon as possible, basically by the end of that particular month after the VAPT has been conducted. Medium risks, these are corrective measures which need to be developed within a reasonable time, and best practice stays within 3 to 6 months. For the low risks, you have the decision to either accept that risk or try to mitigate it further to reduce the exposure onto your organization. So once you have the 3 classifications, you move to the step 8. So this is where you document the results from your risk assessment reports. And this is usually the final step. You start by developing a risk assessment report to support basically management in deciding on what budgets need to be implemented, what policies and procedures need to be reviewed, etc. The report should basically describe the risk, the vulnerabilities, the value, and each threat along with the impact and likelihood of that occurrence occurring. As you work through this process, you'll understand what infrastructure your company operates, what your most valuable data is, and how you can better operate a secure environment for your organization. You can then create a risk assessment policy that also defines what your organization must do periodically to monitor its security posture, how these risks are addressed and mitigated, and how you will conduct subsequent risk assessment processes. These processes help establish rules and guidelines that answer what the threats and vulnerabilities can cause in terms of financial and reputational damage to your organization and how this can be mitigated. Finally, you monitor your security implementations. And this only works best if your cyber risk and cybersecurity risk assessment can help your organization further understand, control, and mitigate all forms of cyber risks that you may be exposed to. It is a very critical component of risk management and development of strategy, as well as data protection efforts. Now that we've gone through the 8 steps, you have been hacked. Let's just put it plain and simple. So what do you do? So there are various ways which you can safeguard your environment. And incident response and recovery plunges into three major types of policies that you should have in your organization. The first one is a cybersecurity incident response plan, which is a guiding light into the grounds that you should use during that emotional hurricane that follows you during a cyber attack. The CSIRP helps security teams minimize the impact of active cyber threats and any incidents from happening again. But as the complexity of cyber attacks increases, so too does the strategies that prevent them. So unfortunately, many businesses are relying upon very outdated incident response plans and are incapable of addressing today's advanced cyber tactics because maybe the last BAPT that was conducted was 5 years ago. And the new and emerging risks, especially during the time we were working from home for the COVID-19 pandemic, those risks could not have been taken into account. So to increase your chances of surviving your next cybersecurity incident, you have then to post your cybersecurity incident plan to all employees, and then you should also group it based on two of the Incident Response Authority guidelines. This is the NIST and also the SANS Institute. Whereas some incidents can be completely addressed with just an incident response plan, others require concerted effort between multiple. And this is where the business continuity plan and the disaster recovery plan come in. So business continuity plan is what keeps your business operations running during any disruption. This is during or an ongoing attack or when you're trying to recover from an attack. A disaster recovery plan then also outlines a pathway into resolving of normal operations after a major incident or major attack. So there are 6 phases that go into a cybersecurity incident response plan. The first one is preparation. So you need to create your security policies. You need to also understand the behavioral controls, such as prohibiting social media access on corporate devices or in your organization's devices, implementing multi-factor authentication, not just for your core systems, but for all login sessions within your organization. Security policies should also make any activity monitoring security controls clear to all employees, and this can be either done using keyloggers or even detecting incident threats. The second stage into preparation is creating a response strategy. So now that you have your policies in place, the next thing is you create your response strategy, which then is achieved by comparing all risks to your defined risk appetite, organizing them by severity level, and then strategizing a recommendation protocol that on this basis creates the risk hierarchy. The third stage within preparation is defining incident communication streams, which is very, very, very important. This plan, your incident response plan, should include contact information for all incident response team members within and outside your organization, especially if you have outsourced some of your services. This will help you gain faster response to cyber incidents, and this could also significantly reduce the damage and cost of data breaches. The fourth step in preparation is establishing a cyber incident document, which covers the 4 W's and the 1 H. So who, what, where, why, and how. So who responded to this incident, what was affected, where did the incident occur, where was the particular action taken, why did you decide to switch off the systems, why did you decide to take them offline, and how did this action help? After that, in the preparation stage, you just now conduct an incident response training to all staff. A real cyber incident should never be the first time that your staff or your teams get to experience a cyber attack. The goal of an entire organization's preparation phase in the cybersecurity response life cycle is to ensure that all the teams are fully equipped, including all staff, and everyone is confident and content with all unforeseeable cyber events. After successfully identifying a cyber event and evaluating its potential impact, you then move to phase 2, which is identification. Identification in this phase, security teams determine whether an incident response plan should be activated or it should not be activated. So when you have suspicious activity and this suspicious activity is detected, the next thing is to alert the security team members as soon as possible to allow them sufficient time to make an appropriate decision on what strategy is to be activated. A good example is where you decide to take your systems offline, and whereas the breach could not have been that big, it could only necessitate one workstation to be taken online. So if you take the entire server offline, then that would significantly affect your business operations. Phase 3 is containment. So we have identified that this is a serious breach, and now we need to contain it. So the primary objective of this phase is to isolate the cyber incident and prevent any further damage from the surrounding systems. So at this stage is where you now involve your forensic experts within the organizations. Phase 2 is usually your security teams. Phase 3 is the forensic teams. And there are various strategies that the forensic team can recommend. So one of them is usually a short-term containment, and this is just simple, just to prevent any further damage to your network. Then immediately after containment, we perform now forensic investigations into how this occurred. And a good tool to have is a forensic toolkit, an FTK, which then can give you a pure state of the compromised environment and tell you more about the cyber attack. After that is always perform a system backup. This is during the containment phase. Immediately after isolating the various cyber compromised systems, perform a backup of, including the cyber compromised systems, perform a backup of also the systems which you suspect have not been compromised, because again, this could be a targeted attack that is moving from one system to the other. Finally, in the containment stage, you need to come up with a long-term containment solution. And this is more or less a strategic containment solution and not just a quick fix. So this could be either revamping your business continuity plan, revamping your disaster recovery plan, removing any backdoors, and rerouting all network traffic to only the clean database systems. Now that you have contained the situation, the next thing is to eradicate it. So from the backups that you have, the response teams will naturally commence removal of any cyber threat, and this is especially if it was a malware. And this is a continuous effort after the containment phase. So you disable any infected systems, you scan any infected systems for traces of any unpatched vulnerabilities, and then you ensure that all your vulnerabilities that caused the breach are addressed and sanitary backups of the compromised systems are then implemented. So if you had a backup from yesterday and you suspect that, or you confirm that your breach happened today, load yesterday's backup and then preload the information that remains. Phase 5 is recovery. So the objective of recovery phase is basically to return systems to the pre-compromised state. So I go back to the same thing. If you suspect you're compromised yesterday or today at noon and you have a backup from 6 a.m., load the 6 a.m. backup and ensure you load all the data that has been lost in between. Phase 6 is keeping the lessons learned, and at this phase, basically, is documenting the lessons that you've learned from that particular incident. And this should help you to deal with future incidents and also can help you with collaboration with other organizations. So what are some of the collaboration and best practices? So for NGOs, it was noted that either you never report the security breaches that have occurred in organizations, again, due to the limited regulatory oversight. And therefore, it is important for you to publish any cybersecurity threat that has occurred and share this across with other organizations, NGOs, basically, either in your sector or in any other sector, just to help them gain more insight into what might come. And with this, we have, as BDO, various services that we have implemented. The ones that you see in red, we have existing portfolio within them. We have current engagements that are running and currently in progress. These are maybe cybersecurity and governance, technology and infrastructure, and app security. We also can manage your security operations center. We conduct data protection and privacy management services, cyber resilience for medium-sized organizations, cloud security, We have a small cyber academy, which we conduct training to the teams within certain organizations just to improve their qualifications and their readiness to deal with disasters. We have business and IT continuity management, and this is an entire service that we're running currently. And we also have affiliates who offer cyber insurance and management. This brings me to the end of my webinar, and I would like to hand over back to Meha to run us some of the questions that he may have encountered in the chat. Again, thank you, and allow me to stop sharing my screen.
Thank you so much, Sahir Sheikh and Paul Macharia, for providing your expertise on cybersecurity. I'm sure all of us learned a lot. I can give you maybe a minute or two if anyone has some more questions. There was a question on the chat about the cost involved in following the steps of the 50 FTE process, and the response was the cost is around $2,000 to $3,000 on average per employee, and it's also said that on average you should allocate 20% of your total IT budget on cybersecurity. And we have one more question asking about, are there some softwares that can alert us that a computer is attempted or attacked? Paul, would you like to take this question?
Yes, so the first line of every organization's defense is defend your network, because the external vulnerabilities outweigh the internal vulnerabilities. So the first line of defense in any particular network is implementation of a solid firewall, keeping that firewall up to date and keep it at the edge of your network. Where budget allows, you can then create a sandbox, which if your firewall is breached, then the first point they land is not on your live environment, it's just a sandbox environment that is just full of a lot of misconstrued information. Thereafter is implement secure systems. Don't go for systems which are not well developed or they have a lot of breaches in their code. And most importantly, to merge the people, the process, and the technology together, you need to also train your staff. Consistently train your staff on cybersecurity risks, because usually the human error is the largest threat factor to any cybersecurity attack. So there are numerous softwares that exist, and this includes data protection tools. This also includes basically an intrusion detection system, if it's separate from your file, and also an intrusion prevention system, which then is layered below the firewall to safeguard your organization's data and network. So safeguard your data, perform your backups as frequent as possible. If you're running on virtualized systems, have a cloud-based backup, disk-based backup if you have to, keep it in a safe. There are various ways to kill this cat and to recover from an incident, and therefore not just any software, it also looks at people, process, and technology.
Thank you, Paul. We have a few more questions. Kus is asking, if you outsource the IT, what are the main attention points for the service provider? ISO certifications, backup, and recovery?
Well, okay, so if you do choose to outsource your environment, there are various risks that come with that, but the security risks outweigh the threats of outsourcing. If you get a reputable service provider to outsource your IT management and your security management, you're at least guaranteed of experts who have undertaken various courses in cybersecurity. This is CISA, CISM, CEH, CBENT, which just to name a few. And therefore, also outsourcing helps you gain further insight from collaboration within other industries. So if a threat occurred in a manufacturing industry, and it has a very similar blueprint to what you're suffering from, then they're able to recover business operations very quickly and use that as a case study to basically recover your operations as soon as possible. So outsourcing does also have its benefits. But then again, if you do get someone who's not proactively managing your environment, security of your environment will be very compromised.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions before we wrap this up? Please type them in the chat. Thank you.
Oh yeah, also there's a comment from Sandeep. This is implementation of an SOC. So basically an SOC is kind of an AI-powered tool that basically monitors behavior. So as a firewall protects you from external threats. Internally, you can also have just to name a few, you can have disgruntled employees who want to disrupt business operations, unmotivated employees who maybe just want to cause some chaos and take some leave. So an SOC is a behavioral analyst AI tool, which then looks at how you're managing your security. So for example, if Paul has never opened a certain network folder, it doesn't give me access to that folder, because my behavior shows that I'm trying to do something very malicious. If I'm trying to send an email to an organization that basically I've never had any previous communication with, then it holds that email in the sandbox and filters that email to ensure that if there is a receipt on the other side, then doesn't have a man-in-the-middle attack which slips on the communication. So an SOC, choosing an SOC structure or choosing an SOC platform depends on budgets, choice, the industry that you're in, and also the number of basically devices and people that you would want to cover. So that also comes into play.
May I, before we conclude, perhaps just remind the participants that we have another webinar this Friday from 2:30 p.m. and it's going to be very interesting. It's about how to empower your HR function to prevent and detect fraud. HR plays a crucial role in fraud prevention in your organization. So I'd encourage all of you to come and listen, and also to inform your colleagues, particularly in HR, to come and benefit from this Friday's webinar.
Yes, thank you. There is one last question before we close up. Samuel's just asking if there's any honeypot systems you can recommend.
Yes, Samuel, there are numerous honeypot systems that I can recommend. Not on the webinar, please reach out via email and we will be able to give you a full list.
Okay, I guess that concludes this webinar. Thank you guys so much. As Zahir said, there's a lot more webinars coming, over 20 webinars until around next June. We hope you guys join the one that's happening this week, because why not take advantage of learning from experts at no cost? Thank you so much again for joining this webinar and taking time out of your day. Thank you.
Bye.